Welcome, everybody. Thank you, Janet. Really looking forward to having this conversation this week. For those of you who uh, are LinkedIn followers, there's been a lot of conversation about data quality and participant integrity this week because we're hot on the heels of SampleCon, which my team member Emily and I went to this week as a kind of first time qualies in the SampleCon event, which was fascinating. And so I have some takeaways that I'm going to share at the end of this with all of you. I also just want to point out that, yes, please use the chat, ask questions along the way. I'm actually going to out a couple of the No Research team members who have joined today. Julia and Shira were just fundamental in getting this presentation off the ground, and feel free to engage in the chat, and one of them may see your question before I do and be able to pipe in and help out with it as well. So thanks you both for joining and for making me look good. Janet was like, I haven't seen this presentation. And I said, well, we just wrote it this week. So this is fresh off the press. So I'm just going to kick things off. This is me. If you don't know me, please connect on all the ways. Happy to have conversations about this topic afterwards as well. And this is basically the deal today. We're going to talk about the problem because this is not a presentation about how amazing data quality is at the moment. This is about a lot of things we've seen really grow in the past year from an integrity and fraud standpoint, and then talk a little bit about the response. We at No Research completed what we called the Participant Integrity Initiative, and that was spurred by a big spike of fraud that we noticed in some of our research. And so we're going to walk you through what we did, what we put in place in our team as a response. And then, as I mentioned, I'm going to talk through a few of the highlights from the conversations at SampleCon this week. Marilyn, I think we're getting a little feedback. Would you mute there? Beautiful. Okay. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the cross-industry response. There's a lot of work group, task force teams, councils, et cetera, going on in the various insights industry groups. So just a little touch point on what's going on there as well. And then I will promise to leave plenty of time for Q&A. All right. Okay, so defining the problem, what is going on here? So basically, the issue from our perspective, may I just say that the troops on the quantitative side of this battle in the panel companies and sample world have been battling this for a long time. But in recent years, qualitative recruiting and participant gathering has experienced this big uptick in fraudulent participants infiltrating studies. And we use a variety of methods of recruiting folks, whether that be a client provided list, any other kind of database, survey respondents going through to then do a qualitative exercise and a mixed method project, even from traditional qualitative recruiting sources, social media posts. When we started noticing this happening, it was really regardless of mechanism. So that's really what I think became in our minds, wow, this is an issue. This is an issue no matter how we're conducting our research. And ultimately, the problem here is not just that there's fraud, but that it's interfering with our ability to deliver quality insights, right? It's the garbage in, garbage out sort of situation. And we're not getting a lot of attention on it on the qualitative side. There's not as much conversation about it, as well as not a lot of standards or protective measures or best practices that are out there in this space specifically aimed at qualitative research. So really, our goal here is to not only revamp what we're doing at No and Scoot to make sure that we're as fraud-free as possible, but really to keep this conversation going. So that's another reason, use the chat, weigh in. If I'm wrong, if there's some amazing industry best practices standards that I don't know, please share that because I think we're just trying to give voice to the topic and get some exposure around it so that we're all being vigilant and we're all delivering the highest quality insights that we can. That's the goal, always, hopefully. All right. And really, I think it's about the design and the participants. So there is a lot of conversation about Survey design is the phrase that's bandied around a lot. I think in our world in qualitative, that very much has to do with screener design, because what is a screener if not a survey? But really, like, you have to think about it from a design standpoint and make sure you nail that and get the right people in the door for you to get that quality on the other side. And we think of it as a spectrum. So there are like as many ways of defining this as there are people that encounter it. This is the way we framed it, where there are these ideal unicorn participants, right? They're thoughtful, they take time, they really read and understand everything. They're, in our mind, not doing this as kind of a side hustle too regularly. And then we've got kind of the less ideal, and then all the way to the fraudulent. So I think you can decide where to pick your battles. I mean, for us, we're really kind of concentrating in the focus here today is on these two groups, and they are different. In our minds, people who do a lot of research, that's one situation, and you can feel about that however you feel. Some people are very adamantly against professional or repeat participants. Other people will, if they're good, let them in. But I think really we should all be fairly upset that there is as much folks who are just blatantly misrepresenting themselves to get into studies, and doing that very regularly. So really that's kind of the sweet spot, but we did want to look at both of those groups. Oh, bless you. Because neither of those are great circumstances. So this is a lot of text. It is I have two slides like this. It's supposed to be overload. These are the first hint that I'll give about the Insights Association toolkit that I've been a part of for a few months putting together. These are kind of the definitions of the characteristics that are causing problems. There's a lot more resources at that link. And I'm happy to, once I get off of full sharing view, I'll pop the links in the chat as well. But it's just really a good resource to understand what are we talking about, and don't put everybody in one bucket. There's multiple buckets of ways in which these things can be problems. Yay. Okay, so basically let's talk about the difference and why we think, it's worth looking at the qualitative a little bit more. So in quant, you've got this combination of these checking mechanisms, tools. A lot of people have lots of tools in place to clear out not only these bad actors, but the bots, right? We hear a lot about keeping surveys clear from bots and all the other ways that people can kind of misrepresent themselves or speed through or flatline, any of the ways that they can do a survey or a screener badly. But at the end of the day, it's a spreadsheet, and it's about cleaning data, and it's about deleting lines, replacing problematic responses, which I'm not saying is a picnic, and I'm not saying that's easy to do, but it is a spreadsheet. The issue that we have in qualitative is that it's up close and personal. So you have a person that you're vetting and having to have a very subjective decision-making process about what are you going to do about that situation. And often, I mean, sometimes you're dealing with a diary study or a bulletin board, so it's at least, not in the moment. But when you're doing synchronous groups, interviews, anything like that, it's right then. It's happening in the moment. If they're not caught earlier in the funnel, which I'll talk about, a real person is having a conversation with another person and needing to figure out what to do. And often in most of our work, there's a client team, a stakeholder team observing and there as well. And that is not the show that we want to put on, of course. And so I've just given an example here. There's many ways in which this happens when someone comes into field work and we're concerned that there's some sort of fraud going on. In this one case, we noticed that, this person had, was two people on the grid, but as we were getting to know her, it felt like this was a very similar person with a very similar look. And yes, in the days of wearing masks, you can kind of pretend to be two people, one with a mask and one without. It's just an example, right? This could be anything. This could be a B2B participant who doesn't sound like they actually know the profession that you've recruited them to talk about. But the emphasis here is that it's a person, not a spreadsheet. And that is a very uncomfortable situation for everyone involved. And so we're really trying to lower the instance of those kinds of moments. Okay, so I mentioned I mentioned the funnel here. So basically um, there's this big funnel here at the beginning, right? This is building your panel, pulling people into surveys. This may even be a screener, right? And there's lots of tools and mechanisms right now to try to clean that data and try to prevent those fraudulent participants from getting through the first rung, right? The first tier of that. I'm about to give you some more text than you can read. This is a smattering of all the ways in which one can catch them at these earlier stages. Again, link to the toolkit. You don't have to read all of this, but what I want to emphasize is there is a lot being done. There are a lot of options. There are a lot of providers that will definitely bend your ear about how they need to be here at this front step to make sure that the data coming through that funnel is clean. I mean, this is amazing, right? This is like, it's so diverse. There's so many options. It's a lot to deal with. And that's hence a lot of the concentration being put at that entry gatekeeping level, which is all great, but really they're coming through. There are some coming through regardless. I think one of the conversations that we kept having at SampleCon was, this is a system that is worth gaming. We're paying people money. It's worth something to people to get through. So they're going to try really hard and use a lot of tools and resources. So we need to be, not too many steps behind them in making sure that we're doing things to catch them along the way. So in our world, once folks come through into this sort of scheduling phase, this could be screening, rescreening, scheduling, booking, however you want to think about that, getting, bodies in seats for whatever the qualitative method is. Some of the kind of measures you can go at this stage are very laborious, to be honest. IP checking, you can use certain tools also at this phase. Often we work with one of our partners to say, can you, put the check in here, because we have no idea what was done in the top of the funnel. So let's be super sure and do another check at this point. Phone screenings, video articulation questions, which is actually mandatory on our studies, but it doesn't catch everybody, but we try a lot. And yeah, to Shira's point in the chat, B2B is almost heightened, right? Because the more you pay, the more worth that system is to game. So yes, definitely. But ideally, none of them make it through. None of them make it through into the session, into the field work, but some do. I will say, if you think that this is not happening to you, it probably is. It probably is in some way. We just, like, the data that's out there about the sort of purpose-built farms, the online communities that we heard about during our initiative, about people sharing how to get into studies, what the study links are, how to say the answer in the right way to get through, coaching that's going on the phone, like this, it is happening. We've noticed that, kind of the giveaways are if they refuse to come on camera, even if we've told them ahead of time, like, this, involves your camera. If they answer in vague terms, or they give incorrect information or contradict themselves, is a really often, we ask them several times where they're based or what they do, or and their answer will change to that question throughout the process, which is a big giveaway. But again, ideally, you don't want to catch it here. You want to use something first so that your field work is as clean and clear as possible. And exactly, Ted, the YouTube, Reddit, Facebook groups, they're all over the place talking about how to do this. And when I get to, we pulled together a group of them, and they told us all about it. It was kind of amazing. We'll get to that in a little bit, just pretty blatantly. So let's go into that. Let's go into our initiative here. So this was our approach. It was threefold. And the first one we went for was, you can call them what you like, but repeat participants. things that people that we think maybe are participating a little too frequently, maybe not doing all the things and all the behavior and all the purchasing that they say they're doing. And we really wanted to kind of figure out why they get in, right? And then we also wanted to talk to, sorry, I've got a window in the wrong place. We also wanted to talk to some fraudulent folks who we knew were not just participating too often, but were blatantly or specifically misleading us. Yes. Yes, Fiona, we did hear about how sizable their 1099s are from the various research companies annually, which was also fairly frightening and illuminating. And then so basically with both of these groups, we wanted to talk to them about how they learn about the studies, what makes this so attractive, what their strategies are for qualifying for studies, and how often they succeed or fail. And really, I mean, this sounds like a participant experience piece of research, which is how we intentionally, designed it so that they thought this is what they were doing. But we really wanted to know, like, what are those failures? Like, who's keeping you out in which ways, and which of these techniques should we be doing a little bit more of, right? Because if someone's making it tricky for them, we all want to learn from that. So we conducted this research, and at the same time, we conducted a number of partner interviews. And these are research partners of ours, folks that we work with on all stages of that funnel. And we wanted to talk to them about the measures that they're taking to prevent as much fraud as possible, and really learn from them and figure out who we're working with, what they're doing, and therefore what we need to be doing as well. Because part of the data integrity council at Insights Association, who put together the toolkit, like part of the main mission was we're all in this together. This is all about us sharing and talking with each other to make sure that we're putting things in place all along that pipeline and at every stage of the process. So we wanted to know, how does this stuff show up? How do they think these fraudsters get wind of their panels, of their studies, of what proactive measures do they take to avoid it? And what do they do reactively after they've collected the data? And what do they do at that point? And as I mentioned, recommendations on how to best work together. So this was a pretty full-scale approach at trying to understand the issue. And what we learned from our repeat participant group, they know how to work it, everybody. We think we're being clever. Anyone who's asking like a past participation question and expecting that to be people really telling you the last time they participated, they are not. Personal soapbox, we should just strike that question and assume everyone's doing this, because they're definitely not giving an honest answer to that question. Yeah, so they're proactively looking in social. They're thinking of this as a side hustle, a gig. They're messing with their demographic information. And what I want to give this one example. So the woman with the headband on the right-hand side of that picture gave this very compelling argument, let's just say. She said, look, I forget what it was, whether I think she got married or had a baby or something in college, and she had to drop out. And so she comes across the education screen and she's like, I did enough. Sure, I'm a college graduate. Like, for all intents and purposes, I went to college. Sorry, like my life doesn't fit into one of your little check boxes here. So I'm just going to check college graduate because I know that gets me in. So it's interesting. Like, some of them are, way out there issues of, being deceitful. And some are situations like that where you're like, yeah, I mean, I do see your point. Versus some of the other responses that we got in the group. Apparently there was some study at the time while we were doing this research that involved watching an entertainment product with a child. Two of the men in the group who were not fathers both gamed that in different ways and were congratulating each other on the ingenious way that they got around not having a kid. One of them was even coached during, apparently, the screen. We have no idea what these studies are, who recruited them. We don't know anything about that. But they were apparently told, like, can you get a kid? to sit next to you. Could you borrow a kid? We really need parents for this study. So it goes all the way from, fudging some demographics because life happens, all the way up to, a real, yes, Laura, yes, thank God I was moderating this one in a mask, because I was not keeping the expressions together while I was hearing this stuff. It was real. It was real. So yes, that was kind of the information that we got from them. And then we went to the fraudulent participants. So how this happened is basically we were experimenting with all these checks and balances during like a 4 or 5 month period, and we caught some people, and I'm putting that in air quotes, right? We identified them as being problematic. We went back to those people and said, sorry, we dropped you from this other study. We'd actually like to talk to you specifically now. So come on board and tell us about this participant, same kind of project objectives. I have to give just a personal shout out to Shira for doing her best to crack them. It was a tough gig. They stuck to their stories. I mean, there were points where they said 3 different locations, and it was, well, where are you based today? Oh, how's the weather in Portland? Oh, it's sunny and nice, and we checked the weather. It was pouring. Could you open the window? We just can't, see you well enough. No, I'm sorry, that window doesn't open, so we couldn't check the weather outside. That it is, they're tricky. So just a note that, we would love the answer to this to be like, we figured out where these farms are and how this all works. We haven't. There's lots of other companies in this space trying to kind of present those case studies and examples and kind of get to the bottom of where these folks are congregating to do this, because we often notice when we have these folks, their background is very similar. You can kind of tell they're passing the device between them and sitting at the same background. But what we did learn was we actually did this. We recruited this and sent this invitation out to 10 people with a Calendly link so that they could book a time. And within minutes, we had more than 100 signups. So those 10 people, it just spread like wildfire. And thank you to Emily, if she's here, about going through the spreadsheet and trying to figure out who the 10 people were, and only inviting the 10 people that were originally on our list. It was a bit crazy. So that's what our screenshot is here of how many folks just came in the door because we sent it to 10 people. It is a good example. We actually replicated something that was kind of less fun because it happened on a live project when we did this. We had a list given to us by a client, and the same thing happened. Obviously, there was one bad actor on that list, and it spread in the same way. So yes, so then we just hope to avoid that happening again. A lot of other things we noticed here was, where they went for those the search terms that they're using, some of the hashtags that they're following to get information about this. I mean, they're being vigilant about this. And I think, we did see some IP address discrepancies. This is a bit of a contentious issue because if a valid participant is using a VPN, their IP address can be flagged. So you have to be a little careful. You have to kind of decide if you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater in that situation, or, say you're doing a B2B study and you think a lot of folks will have VPNs set up, you might have to do something different. Many, we notice, this is not a sling against Google Voice in any way, but we noticed a lot of these folks tended to use a Google Voice number. And we also noticed that they had this very detailed, specific responses, and they would stick to that story no matter what they asked. There's an example. This person was a student of this university. And we said, oh, what's your major? That wasn't part of the screener. It was just part of the interview. And they said accounting really fast. And one of our researchers was like, okay. And they went to that college's website, and the first word on the screen is our leading accounting program. And so all we can think of is like, well, they did that faster than we did to decide that this was a believable major at this institution. So, you know, they're quick, they're smart, and they're sticking to their stories. I do agree. There's a conversation in the chat about some of the DIY platforms like Respondent.io, User Interviews, User Zoom, those HubUX, those kinds of platforms. We don't have the math on the instances in those platforms versus any other method, but I would agree with Ted that he's saying that it's not any higher, but it's still there. Like you still have to watch it. You can't kind of assume that someone's catching these things for you. And I think that's across the board. Don't assume that everyone's catching 100% of this for you. You definitely want to do something yourself to make sure you're ensuring the quality as well. Yes. So then in terms of our partner recommendations, this isn't a bad slide to screenshot. We talked to, I think, 8 or 9 of our partners on this, and they had lots of advice. And I think, you know, everything from locking your survey links to using automated tools to digital fingerprinting, I mean, this is a lot to do. Let me just say that as well, right? We're not saying this is easy. So I think, you know, if those proactive techniques seem a little bit too much, or you're not in the position or organization to be able to start putting all of this in place, then I would really kind of concentrate on that second column of the questions to ask. Because if you're relying on a platform, a tool, a company, a resource, it's just good to ask them. What are you doing to screen and prevent this? What do you think about this issue? What measures are you putting in place to prevent as much as you can? It's really good to know. And it's good to know, I think, also when vetting partners. How do they answer that question? How thorough is their response? How much do they think they're, you know, do they feel like they're on the front lines of this and trying as much as they can? And the note about the referral program is important, because a lot of this can perpetrate itself. So again, like our example of that Calendly link situation, if there is a bad actor in the group and you are giving incentives based on referrals, it's like, what do you throw on the flame? It's whatever to make the fire bigger. I don't remember what you do, but really you're fanning the flame.
Kerosene. You're looking for the word kerosene.
Thank you. Thank you, team. All right, awesome. I love this group. So yes, you're perpetuating the issue if you're using referral bonus in something where you think there might be bad actors. So all good questions to ask. And I think the reactive measures are something that we can all do for those of us that are in charge of the field work portion, and maybe not the parts before that, is, you know, make sure to do your rescreens, not streaming to your whole team. You know, sometimes there is a no-show when in fact, you know, we detected something that we wanted to kick out the back door. Make sure to ask those warm-up questions. There is also debate about identification and if one could or should, depending on your privacy policies and all of the laws in all of the states, if you want to have someone show you an ID. It is something that you can think about. We don't technically do that at the moment because it would be a lot of scrubbing of our recordings if that was the case. But yeah, that's kind of a decision everyone can make on your own as well. Okay, so then we laddered up to some best practices. So this is how our team has decided to approach this. We cannot set industry standards on our own. We just have to look after our projects, right? So what are we going to do? We have all committed to have the conversation in each project. At some point in the initial stage of the project, have a conversation with your suppliers, your team, your client, wherever you sit in the ecosystem, right? Bring it up. Bring it up and say, where are the gaps? Where are the holes? Where do we think something could infiltrate this process? And what do we think we want to or can do about it? You know, in very simple terms, that could be an over-recruit. Right? But just to make time to have the conversation, because every project is different. And so you want to make sure that you have that conversation every time to keep it salient, and keep it in the conversation. We vet our new partners. We review our existing partners annually because they could be doing something cool and new and different that we don't know about, that maybe we can be less vigilant because they're doing more. We're not sure. So we want to make sure we ask that. And then we want to do proactive data quality checks. We want to make sure we're always ensuring quality from the start, so you don't get into a situation where there's a lot of replacing going on along the way. All right. We also want to make sure we're using a customized approach. Like I said, no project is the same, and testing new quality control measures regularly. So we have a big spreadsheet of what we used, what the source was, how many people total, how many people were, we were suspicious of fraud. So we can track it and we can see which control measures are stopping which people in which way. Are we improving by doing all of this, or are we just, spending more time and energy on this? So tracking it and continually trying new things is really important. And to make sure you're always adapting, right? So we want to make sure that we're a voice, that we're listening, that we're doing things like this. This is like what we're doing in our third column here, to make sure that we're always adapting. And that's why I want to make sure, and I will leave a lot of time for Q&A, because I'd love to hear what other people are doing and what other people have found beneficial in this space. Thank you, Fiona, for the call out on the white paper. Feel free to go check it out. We've sort of written all of this up in a non-slide version as our initiative white paper. And the results so far, we have in this time period where we started noticing it and tracking it. Now, I think before the winter of 2021, it was probably happening. It was just not often enough for us to get armed about it and start tracking it and start trying to fix it. So once we started tracking it, we noticed a 19% of fraud in our sessions. And that is italicized because it means that it made it all the way through the funnel. So making it all the way through the funnel and entering the session and us realizing that something is wrong. And since we've put some of these practices in place, we have the studies since then have gone down to a 2.7% incidence rate of what we suspect to be as fraud. And that is with a huge uptick, right? Those, 17% of people didn't go away. They just got caught earlier. Right. So we're not saying, oh, we use better sources and we're doing better. We were catching them earlier so that they weren't coming into the session. Fiona, it is definitely related to the pandemic. This uptick, everyone saw this happening in 2020 and 2021, right? Research was moving online. People are out of work. For all of the reasons, this kind of big uptick did have. I don't think it's consequential that it happened on and around the pandemic. So yes, so we feel good. We don't feel like, we've got it all figured out now. We're still learning and we're still figuring it out and we're still testing things, but it does sort of prove that there is validity to being a bit more vigilant, basically. Okay, and then I promised to report back from our time at SampleCon earlier this week. It was a huge education to myself, really, about the language differences and the priority differences between those that are at the top of the funnel versus the bottom of the funnel, right? There were terms that I was writing down to Google about all the technology and all the tools and all of the resources that people are using up there to keep us all safe. And it was really impressive, but it's also kind of become this, from what I heard, a very annual conversation about, but people are still getting through. What more can we all do? So how I kind of broke it down in essence for this group was a couple kinds of things. The fact that we're dealing with a commodity. So these folks know that, that's how they are treated. This is a, pay something to give something sort of situation and ecosystem. And so that's a big reason for us to need to stay ahead, right? Because they're working the system. We need to work the system even better to protect ourselves. And they're a finite commodity. They're finite, therefore they're a commodity, right? It matters to keep the good people in and engaged, and to not do so much that we turn off people that would be great participants and want to contribute, because the security measures and the checkpoints and everything are getting so much. So we all really need to respect them. We need to respect the humans that are authentically wanting to participate in this process, and be gracious, not come out like all guns blazing, and dissuade those who want to participate from participating, which I think is important to understand. And these were just some of the things that were said at the event, and they're not at our disposal. The idea that they're doing us a favor, I mean, yes, we're paying them, but they could be doing lots of other things with their time. So I think it's really important to remember this. If we're trying to have great empathy and human engagement, we have to make sure we're treating them all through the funnel like that. All right. And the other point was, we were really gratified to hear that the second point was around conversations, because, that's where we netted out with our own best practices but kind of leveling up the conversation. How do you have a common sense conversation throughout the supply chain about what's feasible, what's recommended? If you don't go with the recommendations, what are the trade-offs? Like, are you willing to compromise quality? If so, are you okay with compromised results? If we're saying no, or we're putting the quality gate up, some other company is going to do it for less without caring. So there was this really call to action about, we all need to be on the same page here. We all need to be recognizing when something could potentially cause or encourage or promote fraud, and not do that, not kind of let that go through or get approved. So really it's about suppliers at all points communicating with each other, sharing feedback, supporting each other to keep these standards high. And I think most importantly, there was a lot of conversation about how to talk about this with our clients. And any kind of client brand folks on the call, I would love to know kind of your point of view on this. How much do you want to hear about this? Do you just want, is it something for suppliers to just take care of? Or, is this something that could be a compelling point of difference if someone is really, making a pledge in this area? Because, it's time and money. Versus quality sometimes, as we all know, right, in lots of different ways. So it was really kind of a call to have the conversations, make sure we're having a consistent message, and that message is getting up to the buyers of the research, so that they really feel, like, join us on our soapbox about this and how important it is to our research output. Just a small plug here that in addition to the council that I'm on, actually a number of industry organizations have come together to focus on this. And this is really recent. This announcement came out on Wednesday, I believe, from a data quality standpoint. So if you are involved in any of these other organizations, please reach out. I think they probably all have work groups, task forces, council, something to kind of have that conversation and be able to help, so that this is really a concerted effort around multiple organizations. So definitely reach out to one of them. Keep your eye on the news on things like this to try to keep in the know of what the next steps are.